Welcome back to Fast Market here on Schwab Network. I'm Diane King Hall alongside Tom White in our Chicago studio. Time now for our cash tag segment, taking a look at strategy. For that, we want to bring in our next guest, and that is Andy Swan, co-founder of Likefolio. So, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Friday. We've been watching strategy alongside Bitcoin today because we've been watching the Bitcoin weakness, and we know often strategies, formerly known as MicroStrategy, can be a proxy. So shares are under some pressure. There was a rumor that Michael Saylor was offloading Bitcoin. He tweeted today, or posted on X, however you say it now, quote, "We are buying." I'm interested to know when you look across your data, recent data, how strategy stacks up.
Well, it's interesting. Bitcoin, it feels like panic time. It's down from 126,000 to 96,000. But if you zoom out just a little bit, Bitcoin is still up approximately 50% since before the election a year ago. Still a very strong asset, but MicroStrategy or strategy, MSTR, is under pressure because Bitcoin is down, but it's also under pressure because there's just simply a lot more competition for what they do. There were years and years from 2020, essentially till 2023, 2024, where strategy or MicroStrategy was the only proxy that an individual investor could use in the stock market to get exposure to Bitcoin. But that has changed dramatically. Now we have all the Bitcoin ETFs, we have other Bitcoin treasury companies that are competing for those same dollars. And while the pool of dollars is expanding, a lot less attention is being paid to strategy as a percentage of that whole. So I think that's the biggest thing, that the biggest takeaway here is Bitcoin's under pressure, strategy's under pressure, but now we've got strategy to the point where its Bitcoin holdings are essentially the same value as its market cap. It was before you were paying a very significant premium to have that single exposure to Bitcoin in the stock market. That's gone away. Now we've got strategy at around $200. It's right in line with its Bitcoin holdings value. And so it's become finally a little bit of a value play here.
Andy, that was kind of the topic that I was going to bring up, because it's actually the market cap of MicroStrategy right now, or strategy, is actually lower than it, or just above its Bitcoin holdings, right in line. That's a concern, right? Because there's ETFs out there now that you can get into Bitcoin. More firms are allowing more cryptocurrency trading. That's a positive here. But when you look at Bitcoin as a whole, and there's a big high correlation, it's finally the price of strategy versus Bitcoin is at the widest level that it's been over the last couple of years here. Is that reflective that, hey, even though there's competition for maybe money going into crypto, at the same time, maybe this is a good opportunity for strategy, especially if we see some consolidation or maybe a turnaround here in Bitcoin itself?
Yeah, I think a turnaround in Bitcoin itself would obviously be very positive for strategy. But beyond that, I want to kind of take you back in August of 2020 when MicroStrategy announced it was buying Bitcoin and putting it on the balance sheet and transforming their entire business. The stock was $14. 2 years later, December of 2022, the stock was $14. Michael Saylor has a history of his vision being too early for Wall Street. And I think that's exactly what's going on here. I don't think that strategy is purely a proxy on Bitcoin. I think strategy is essentially becoming, a central bank for the digitization of money. They own 4, maybe 5% is where they're going to end up of all the Bitcoin that will ever be printed. And when a organization owns 4 or 5% of all of the hard money, we call that a central bank. And you can start to see that strategy forming out as they put these preferred products onto the market. STRC is out there paying a 10.5% tax deferred dividend. It's essentially acting like a money market account for people. If you believe Bitcoin is going to be a central part of a new digital monetary global system, then strategy once again is very far ahead of the game. If you don't believe that, then strategy is a proxy for Bitcoin and it's a binary bet. So you just have to figure out which side you're on. And if you believe that Michael Saylor, once again, is ahead of Wall Street by years, then probably a decent opportunity here to start picking up some exposure.
But there's concentration risk, right? And then especially when you see the drawdown in Bitcoin, especially if it gets, further, it could potentially impact MicroStrategy or strategies, I guess, ability to service debt, because that's the other thing, they've issued debt as well. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, the way I think about it is very similar to if you were investing in someone in an organization that was buying, property, real estate buildings in Manhattan. You have, and they're offering to pay you dividends if you loan them the money to do that. The way that you get there is that you believe the underlying asset is ultimately undervalued, in this case, Bitcoin, and is going to go higher. If you believe that, then the debt obligations, the dividend obligations that they have into the future become very, very small as Bitcoin moves higher. If Bitcoin doesn't move higher, if it doesn't pan out, if that real estate development project doesn't work, then you're in trouble because the entire organization has levered itself to future obligations. So you really have to believe, in order to invest in strategy, you have to be able to understand and accept high volatility, and you have to be a believer in the core principle that Bitcoin becomes a transformative part of a new digital money era.
Okay, Andy, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, point blank, because of that correlation we talk about, right? If you look at Bitcoin and then MicroStrategy, if you like Bitcoin, right, and you guys are probably pretty positive on Bitcoin, according to your data, that just means that maybe MicroStrategy is a little bit oversold here?
Yeah, I think that it's finally gotten, like we talked about before, it's finally gotten to the point where the multiple to net asset value is low enough that you're not paying an extraordinary premium over Bitcoin. And so, again, if you're ready for the volatility that strategy offers, you have to be able to accept that. But as an exposure to Bitcoin, as a levered exposure to Bitcoin, I think that it's finally at a price here that starts to make sense, and at a ratio to Bitcoin that starts to make sense at this point. So, after about a year of very, very troublesome, returns and strategy, I'm starting to see light at the end of the tunnel, especially, as we compare it to Bitcoin. So, and yes, we are very much bullish on Bitcoin and have been for a long time.
All right. Thank you, Andy. That's Andy Swan, co-founder of Likefolio. Appreciate the deep dive there.